Hello everyone, my name is Makeda Voletta, also known as the Body Scientist and Queen Lioness. Um, and I am here today in my beloved city of New York, in Harlem to be exact, in Riverside Park. And if you follow me, you are probably used to my videos being about health and sexuality, but today's going to be a little bit different. Today I want to talk about why I love New York so much and why it's such a great city. Such a great city to be in and to live in and to raise kids in. And I feel like New York gets a bad rap a lot of times. As a native New Yorker, a native Harlemite, um, who grew up going to New York City public school, born in 1981. So I was here in the 80s and 90s, New York wasn't what it is now in terms of safety. But even as a kid, I loved New York and I always felt safe. And so I'm going to go through a list of why New York is so great. I know a lot of people who thought that um, New Yorkers were mean, and they expected they had this negative idea of New York. They say that we're mean, that we never talk to people. But I'm gonna say that I travel a lot around the United States. I've spent a lot of time in Chicago, New Orleans, Southern California, the Bay Area, DC, Miami, um, Philly, Detroit. Um, those are all places, Atlanta, Pittsburgh, that I've spent a lot of time in, like either lived there or have been there like 10 times for 2, 3, 4 weeks. So I don't judge a city unless I've been there several times, unless I've been to several different parts of the city and stayed in different parts of the city and talked to different people who are from that city. Um, to get the real scoop, to get the real scoop from like people older than me from Detroit, to get the real scoop from people who are born and raised in Chicago, about what's really going on and what the real deal is. And one of the things that I appreciate about New York so much is that number one, it's a very safe city. New Yorkers are not gun crazy, unlike the rest of the country. Whether we're talking about the South or the Midwest or the West Coast, Americans are gun crazy. Growing up in New York, as a kid, we don't even think about guns. It's not a part of our culture. And that's not to say that people here, there's nobody here with a gun or that people don't get shot. But we don't have a gun culture, so we don't grow up like with guns in our hands and learning to shoot, going to shooting ranges, or even having discussions about that. It's not something. And in New York, we're not fighting to have more gun rights. Like nobody in New York can have a license to have a gun, and it's not something that people in New York are discussing or concerned about or up in arms about. Like I remember being in Louisiana with a girl from New Orleans, and she was living in Houston. She had like 5 guns, and talking about New York, she's like, "Oh, you guys, your rights are being infringed upon," and I'm like, "We don't feel like that though, Like people in New York aren't stressing over some gun shit." And the statistics show that it actually matters because New York, if you Google the top 100 cities with murders and crime, the highest top 100 rates, New York City is not on the list at all. Now, for a city of 8 million people, such a huge city, one of the biggest cities in the country, to not be on the list of the top 100 cities of homicides and crime and violence is a big deal. Um, and I feel super safe. And even as a kid, when New York wasn't as safe, I felt safe because there was always places to run, especially in Manhattan. A lot of people don't realize that Harlem is actually in Manhattan. It's the northern part of the island. And as a kid, there's always people around, always businesses, bodegas to run into. So I always felt very safe. And now it actually is very safe. When I'm in Oakland, when I'm in Philly, when I'm in the hood of Miami and Chicago, Detroit, I've been in parts of Atlanta where I'm like, you could pay me to get the fuck out of the car right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, you just couldn't. This shit does not look right. I feel safe walking around anywhere in New York. This parts of Queens is a little scary and desolate, but you know what I'm saying? Then the gang stuff. Like, we have gangs, but it's not that serious. It's not like what's going on in Chicago or LA where people like generational gang shit and you can't wear this color and you can't wear your hat like this and you can't wear your pants like that. People in New York don't have time for that shit. Like, you know, people are gonna wear what the fuck they want to wear, and you know, wear the colors they want to wear. Like, we're not gang crazy like that. We we had gangs, Latin kings, and stuff like that growing up, but I don't remember it being that big of a deal like it is in other cities. Um, New York has very progressive people. Some of the most progressive people and pioneers in many fields are in New York. Um, like even like our abortion laws, which is something that since I was a little girl, I was very much pro-choice and very much an activist for the pro-choice movement, and it's very interesting because I've never had an abortion, but ever since I was like in the fourth grade, I was like very much pro-choice and like arguing that statement that it should be accessible to women. And in New York, it is, like it's even like for teenagers, like teenagers in New York can get abortions without their parents finding out, and some people think that's crazy, but to me, that's actually a very good idea because a lot of people, there are girls who get raped by their dad and they're pregnant by their stepdad, their biological dad. There's parents that won't let this 14-year-old get an abortion because they're super religious. And any girl or woman that says is pregnant that says I can't do this, they should not be forced to do it. That causes a super traumatic situation. But a lot of people living in small towns, like they have to ask someone to drive them. And then some states have a law where it's like you need both parents' signature in order to do it. Some people don't know what both of their parents are. Some people got raped by one of their parents, by their dad. So that's an issue, So accessibility and access is something we have in New York, period, across the board. There's bodegas. No matter if you're in a poor neighborhood in New York, or a rich neighborhood in New York, or uppity or hood, whatever. There's tons of stores. In the hood, there's a million bodegas. Bodegas in New York sell everything. They sell perms. They sell basketballs, toys for your kids. They sell like hookah stuff. They sell anything you can need. You're like, oh, I need light bulbs. I need tape. I need whatever the fuck you need. They have it in the bodega. And the bodegas in New York are super tiny. But when I'm in the suburbs or I'm like someplace like Atlanta or whatever, all there are gas station stores and 7-Eleven, both of which are super limited. The bodegas in New York have more shit than the gas station stores and the 7-Elevens. They all have Haagen-Dazs, and those of you who follow me know that I'm a Haagen-Dazs fiend. Every bodega in New York has Haagen-Dazs, like tons of them. But when I'm not in New York, it's hard to find that shit. I have to go like CVS, and like they have like 5 flavors, and you have to go all out the way. New York, you just go like even the bodegas in New York, they have like good quality stuff. Like you can find coconut water, raw coconut water, kombucha, and you can find some quality things. But when I go to like gas station stores and stuff in other cities, they just have like Tampico juice and like just bullshit. So even in the hood in New York, there's options. There's also tons of fruit stands everywhere. Like I've spent a lot of time in Miami and South Beach, and there's no fruit in South Beach. You can't find anywhere in South Beach is anybody selling fruit. But you could be in the middle of Manhattan, Brooklyn, and there is people everywhere with stands of fruit. There's delis everywhere selling fruit and fresh flowers. I've never been to another city where you see fresh flowers everywhere 7 days a week. I haven't seen that in D.C., I haven't seen that in Chicago, I ain't seen it in L.A., I ain't seen it in Florida, nowhere. Then, our public transportation is super great. Like, there's a lot of people in New York that have cars. People say New Yorkers don't drive, but a lot of New Yorkers do drive. There are a lot of New Yorkers who have cars and a lot who don't. A lot of New Yorkers who have cars don't drive every day, but there's a lot of cars here. So many cars that you can't find a parking space a lot of times, especially if you're in Manhattan. It's easier in the outer boroughs. Then there's a million parking lots that are full to capacity all the time. So there's lots of cars in New York. But people that have a car in New York, like they don't always drive it every day. Or like if something happens to your car, and it breaks down. If you live in the suburbs of most of America where you need a car, you're gonna have to come up with the $500, $600, $700 to fix your car. You can't go to work. You can't do anything. So just eating your money. In New York, if something happens to your car, you're not stuck. You still have options. Before Uber, we had an abundance of cabs. That wasn't the issue. But when I traveled around, even when I was in New Jersey, like in Jersey City, or I was in Atlanta, or I was in D.C., I remember being in D.C., you couldn't get a cab on a Sunday. Unless you were like down by Union Station, you could not get it. You couldn't call a cab. You had to have the phone number to a particular cab driver's. You had to have their personal phone number to get a cab on Sunday. But then if they flake, then you're stuck. So me being a New Yorker with shit to do, like that's stressful because it's like if you have a flight to make or you have something important to do, and you're dependent on this one cab, and then they flake on you, you're stuck. Public transportation in DC ends at like midnight. Like New York at 4 in the morning, the trains are packed. They're packed with people, and not just like weirdos and crazy people, but like regular people, and it's like white, black, Asian, everything on the train. So diverse. New York is so diverse. That's another thing. Spending time in Atlanta, I lived in Atlanta. It's like white and black people in Atlanta are in two different worlds. Like they do not see each other at all. They're invisible to each other. I remember spending time in Piedmont Park, and it was like they would just like walk past each other like they were invisible. Growing up in New York, for me it was like the Cosby Show. Like I had all kinds of friends. I had black and Asian, Hispanic, Jewish, everything. And we all grew up together. Even if you didn't live in that neighborhood, like it's just diverse everywhere. You always come in contact with all kinds of people. Um, and so a lot of cities aren't like that. Chicago isn't like that. One of my favorite cities is Chicago, but and one of my favorite cities is New Orleans. Both of those cities are super violent. Whereas New Orleans, you have to worry about getting shot any goddamn where. People get shot anywhere in New Orleans. There's no safe place where you won't get shot. You'll get shot in the French Quarters. You'll get shot in the shopping mall. Girls get shot. Don't matter. Chicago, I feel like it stays in the hood, but the hood in Chicago makes me super nervous, and it's like such a like you could drive for like 100 blocks in the hood of Chicago. There's no supermarkets. I don't ever remember seeing a supermarket ever in the hood of Chicago anywhere. Um, you drive like 30 blocks and you see a bodega or a corner store that looks like they got like 5 gates in front of it. Looks dusty as hell. It looks like if you go in there, you might die, and it looks like they don't have shit in it. And I go through the hood in Chicago. I go through the hood in DC, and I'm a very observant person. I'm not a hater. I'm honest. But in DC and Chicago, those two stand out to me. Like in the hood, people look really dusty. Like they just look dusty. Like they haven't bathed. And don't get me wrong, there are a lot of beautiful people in Chicago. A lot of beautiful black people in Chicago. But um, when I have ridden around Chicago and spent time just observing, there's a lot of people in the hood of Chicago that look fucked up. They look dirty. They don't. Their outfits look whack. It's like you come to the hood in New York. It doesn't matter if you're in the Bronx, Queens, Manhattan, Brooklyn. People have swag. People have a dope outfit. People gonna fly kicks. People look dope. They still got swag. They look clean. Um, so New York, men and women are like swagged out. And there's no one style here. It's whatever you want to be. It's super diverse like that. There's not one thing that defines us. You know, um, whatever you want in New York, you can find it. We also have great public schools. Like I was educated in New York City public schools. I went on to the University of Delaware for undergrad and Columbia University for graduate school. But when I went to college at University of Delaware with people from the suburbs of Maryland and Pennsylvania, New Jersey, like who went to private school, they were super sheltered, naive, hadn't experienced anything. Um, and the public schools in New York are so good. Like a lot of rich people and politicians and Madonna and Nas send their kids to public school. Um, so for me, it's just like why waste all this money, paying college tuition for your kids to go to private school, and they can get a great public education. And New York City has great public schools. I know a lot of cities can't say that. A lot of areas can't say that. So New York is safe. You can great public schools. You have access to stuff. You can get around easily. When I was 12 years old, my brother and I we took the bus to school on our own. I went to my softball games. The city bus stopped right in front of my parents' house where I grew up, and I took it to my softball game in the morning on Saturday morning. My parents didn't have to take me every single place I went. But I went to college with people from the suburbs, and I found that out. Like they couldn't wait to get a driver's license when they were 17 or 18, so they could have independence. And their parents had to take them everywhere. I'm like, that is so lame. Like to me, thinking about being 15, 14, 13, my parents taking me everywhere sucks. In New York, at that age, you're independent. You can move around on your own. So that's great as a kid growing up. But it's also great for the parents because you can have your own life. And then New York, there's like if you have interesting parents, like there's so many things. I mean, if you're a kid, you have interesting parents. There's so many things that you can be exposed to, and as an adult, there's so many things you can be exposed to. So many cultural things happening. The best of the best here. It's not like a city like Chicago. You have to it's very like about who you know. If you want to open up a business or something, very cliquish. You know, LA, you gotta suck up to people. DC, you gotta suck up to people. DC people, I feel like they don't even talk to you. They don't know. If you don't know somebody in their clique, you're invisible. You know, New York is not like that. New York is like if you're dope, then and you're good at what you do, then we'll recognize you. Period. You know what I'm saying? You don't gotta suck up to people. It's not all that shit. It's just if you're dope, you fucking dope. You're the best of the world who come here and do big things. And if you make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. But if you make it in New York, that's because you're official. I've spent a lot of time on the West Coast and North and South, and the performers in the West Coast suck. In Seattle, in California, like all the street performers, the street performers, they all suck. The people that play the buckets, the people that dance in the street, they suck. In New York, you see like talented ass people, you know, all the time. You never know who you're talking to. Then people say New Yorkers don't talk to anybody, but you know, with me, people in New York talk to me every goddamn day. They talk to me so much. Like, you know, girls in New York, we usually walk around with earphones because dudes talk to you so much that we wouldn't get anywhere. And even with the earphones, it don't stop them. But people talk to you a lot in New York. No, we can't talk to every single person we see because we have shit to do. We have places to go. And there's too many people to do that. But people in New York start conversations with you a lot more than they do in other cities, you know. If you have something interesting, they'll compliment you, you know, random strangers. And people I know who've spent time in New York have admitted that. Some people have come to New York with this preconceived, you know, stereotype, and they may have come here for 2 or 3 days, and maybe they stayed in Midtown by the road trip by Times Square, which nobody from New York likes that area, and it's all tourists. So somebody might come here for like 3 days and stay at Times Square, and they're like, "Oh, I hate New York. It's so crazy. They're so rude." Yeah, because you weren't in the real New York. You were around a bunch of tourists, you know, in a very stressful area. Times Square is nothing like the rest of the city. Then I'm sure you've seen all the people riding by me on bikes and skaters all year round, even in the wintertime. New York is super active. Like I've never seen more people on bikes in any other city. And to me, New York is not that bike friendly. DC is a very bike friendly city. New Orleans is a very bike friendly city. Chicago. Those are all places that if I lived, I'd ride bike because it's like easy breezy, you know, driving around. New York is crazy, and there's more people on bikes in New York City than I've seen anywhere else. You know, just fearless people. But I'm in the park right now, and in the park is nonstop bikers, joggers, people on skates. Um, you know, there's so many beautiful parks in New York, and in Harlem in particular, there's a lot of parks. I've never seen another city with so many parks, so many basketball courts. You know, so many playgrounds for kids, and then our parks are really nice. Like we have like big rocks in them and like bushes that you can go be in the cut. When I've gone in parks in Atlanta or parks in like you know the Bay Area or just different places I've been as I travel around, the parks are all flat. Like Piedmont Park in Atlanta, it's like totally flat. There's no rocks or anything to sit on, no landscape, skinny little trees. So you can't. Everything's like super manicured. So there's no place you can go in that park and just be in the cut, be in the bush, and not be seen. New York, you can't. So we have great parks. And as a kid, I didn't miss. I grew up in an apartment. I didn't miss not having a yard because I had a park across the street from me. Central Park was by all my schools. My dad took me to the park every single day. I never played on the sidewalk. I rode my bike, my skates, everything in the park. You know, um, and so I just like to tell a different side to New York and defend my city because I have spent a lot of time in a lot of cities, and to me, New York is a doper city in America, um, and one of the best in the world because of our diversity, because of how many people coexist here. You know, you have progressive people, you have the best of the best in the world, people who are the best in their city, the best in their country who come here to do it. Um, I work in the fitness industry. All of the high-end gyms started in New York. Um, so at Equinox, which is all over the world now, but they started in New York. So they might have like 2 in LA, 2 in Miami, but they have like 10, 15, 20 locations in New York. Crunch Gym, which is not necessarily high-end, but it's a big chain that's been along for a long time. But that had a different approach to fitness. Crunch started in New York City, now it's all over the country. But it's a franchise, but Crunch, there may be like 1 or 2 in another city, and there's like 15 of them in New York. Same thing with David Barton, like all the high-end gyms started here. So you have like very progressive people in New York, you know, and it's a very efficient city. Like no matter what happens, New York takes care of it like a boss. You know, 9/11 happened, and there's so many highways where you're driving into New York City from New Jersey, from Queens, from Brooklyn, where you can clearly see the World Trade Center. So that clear, beautiful, sunny morning, there were lots of people driving, and nobody crashed into anybody. They didn't have to leave cars in the highway. I remember that day they told everybody, like, you cannot leave off of or come onto the island of Manhattan. Now, in New York, a lot of people don't work or go to school in their borough. So there's people who go to school and work in Manhattan who don't live in Manhattan, and vice versa. So even though they made that rule, no kids got stuck at school that day. No cars got stuck on the highway that day. But then you got Atlanta where they got an inch of snow, kids got stuck in school overnight, all these people had to leave their cars on the highway, like, that shit was ridiculous. And people were like, oh, well, Atlanta's not used to the snow. And New York wasn't used to 9/11, but we handled it. It's about having competent people in charge and being efficient. And given that I grew up in New York and that's my standard, I have a hard time dealing with, like, inefficiency for no fucking reason. And a lot of cities are like that. So, New York is expensive, but there's also more money in New York. There's more money to be made in New York. I feel like the cost of living is a lot everywhere. Miami was voted one of the most expensive cities, and it's not because their prices are more than New York. It's compared to how much it costs to live. It actually is one of the most expensive cities. The people in New York make more, and depending on what you do, there's way more potential to make more in New York than there is in other cities. So I've lived a lot of places, and I've thought about moving other places, and at the end, I just say, you know what, New York is just the best place. I'm just gonna have to make the money to be here because I like being safe. I don't like having to worry about getting shot all the time, which you do in a lot of cities. At 3 in the morning, I can leave my house and go to the store and get whatever I want. If I decide at 3 in the morning I want some ice cream, I want some ginger ale, I need some toilet paper, a bottle of water, I can go outside. And if that bodega doesn't have it, the one across the street does, they don't have it. It's like bodegas in every block. So you have access to everything. Today I wanted to get some cocoa butter, so I went to 125th Street. There's a bunch of vendors on 125th that sell shea butter, cocoa butter, all natural soaps. Brooklyn, same thing. There's a lot of different places. So you can just you have access to stuff. You can get whatever you want. There's a reason why hip hop came from New York. There's a reason why salsa music came from New York. We create here. Like, I remember the first time I went to Miami, I almost went to graduate school in Miami. When I first went there, I was like, oh, this is like New York in the tropics. Because it's super diverse. But then I realized, no, it's not like New York because Miami is super segregated. It's like the Colombians over here, the Haitians over there, the Cubans over there. I never experienced blatant racism until I was in Miami from the racist white Cubans in Miami who are straight assholes. Like, I grew up in New York around Dominicans and Puerto Ricans, and they were just like me. Colored, brown, mestizo, Afro. They could be Spanish and Indian, African and Indian, African and Spanish, but none of them were like white. A lot of people don't understand, like, you can be a black Hispanic, you can be a black Cuban, you could be a white Cuban, you could be a mixture of the two, you could be from the indigenous, you could be a Chinese Cuban, just like with America. You could be a black American, a white American, Native American, Chinese American. So the Cubans that are in Miami are like white, and they're blatantly racist, and they're corny. Like, they don't have swag. Like, you come to New York, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, they're cool, and we get along with them like this. Black people and Puerto Ricans in New York are like this. We've been creating with each other since, Latin jazz in the 50s, boogaloo in the 60s, salsa and hip hop in the 70s. Like, J-Lo was a fly girl. And if you follow me, you see I dance salsa all the time. That's what Harlem is. You know, um, not to say that New York didn't have racial tensions, because Brooklyn did. When I was growing up, blacks and Italians, blacks and Jews would be fighting. But in Manhattan, there was no beef. And for the most part, it's not like most places. So I say all this to say that if you haven't ever been to New York, it's good to visit it with someone who's from here. But it's too big of a city to come here for 2 or 3 days and then make up your mind. I don't like New York, and you stayed at Times Square, and you went to all the touristy parts. Like with any city, that's not the thing. Like, when I travel to other cities, all the cities that I've mentioned, I didn't stay in the touristy area. I didn't go there for 3 days. I've been there several times. I've spent week, 2, 3 weeks there, and I've been around people who were born and raised there all their life who told me the truth. And I observed with critical minds and open eyes. So um, after all of that and all my traveling, I just am like, New York is super dope. I'm super happy to be from here and to live here. And I always wanted to raise my kids here. And when I have kids one day, that's where I want them to be. Because it's like, you can make such an interesting person in New York. And so I think that this 25-minute video, I think think I made my case for my city. So I'm just sitting here in the park right now in Riverside Park, looking at New Jersey. It's beautiful, and yeah, my heart is filled with love for my city all the time. And so I decided to make this video while I'm sitting here. So yeah, props to New York, and if you've never been here, come through. All right. Okay, people. If you like this video, follow my page and check out my other videos. And I'll see you later. Have a great day. Bye.